Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. For those who don't know me, my name is Paul Robillard. I am the chair of the Carleton Federal Liberal Association, and Art and I will be co-hosts this evening for what I'm sure you'll find to be a fascinating big picture overview and context for the tour that you've signed up for this coming Earth Day weekend. As we're all aware, climate change and the transition to a greener, cleaner economy is a top priority for our federal Liberal government. And the recent budget contains a host of new initiatives to support that transition at all levels of the economy, including at individual households like ours. So it was with that background that the CFLA team decided to make emission reductions the focus of our Earth Day event. And we began by taking a quick look around our riding for some ideas and examples of practical projects that would be suitable for all of us to be able to actually pursue. And fortunately, it didn't take long to locate a fantastic project, as well as one very knowledgeable and passionate technical resource in Art Hunter, who is our co-host tonight and I've been chatting already. Art is our special guest for this evening, and in a moment he'll begin his presentation. And Art will also be our guide for this weekend's tour of the Manotick Microgrid. Art, I'm sure many of you may know Art already, but Art is a longtime Manotick resident, and he brings a wealth of experience and expertise to this topic. He has a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering from the Royal Military College. He also has a PhD in Aeronautical Engineering from Imperial College in London. For 15 years, he did spacecraft design, and in fact, Art was the project manager for Canadarm on NASA's space shuttle. After 35 years, he retired after providing consulting engineering services to clients. He is a very active member of the Canadian Association for the Club of Rome and has delivered many presentations on our climate crisis. And in the last 5 years, he has designed, built, and operated the Manotick Microgrid. And the microgrid includes solar and geothermal energy supply, combined with 3 Tesla power batteries and 2 electric vehicles. On a related note, I just must say that the CFLA team was really pleasantly surprised by the response to this Earth Day event. As I said in the warm-up here, our initial plan had been to do 2 tours on Saturday, and however, just due to overwhelming response, those 2 Saturday tours have become 6 tours spread over both Saturday and Sunday. So as I noted a bit earlier, tonight's session will particularly focus on the big picture, and Art has done an amazing job of putting together an incredible slideshow, and with a ton of information that I'm sure you will find fascinating. And so it's our hope that tonight, everyone, you will be inspired by the big picture view, and the weekend tours will provide a practical example of how many of the same technologies that we'll be looking through tonight can be applied within our own homes. And so I look forward to that. Just before we jump on I turn it over to Art, just a couple of quick housekeeping measures. We'll try to keep the session to about an hour. We've set aside 40 minutes for Art to do his presentation, and Art has done this on numerous occasions, and his suggestion is that we let him do the complete presentation, and we'll save about 20 minutes at the end for questions. I ask that as we go along, if you do have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat room, and feel free to ask personalized questions about how how this may apply to you. As host, I will do my best to monitor the questions for the chat room, and at the end at the end of the session we'll pose those questions to Art. Please keep in mind that don't forget there will be lots more time on the weekend to follow up if you have follow-up questions. And as Art has already indicated, we will be recording this session. We will make it online, available to you online. The CFLA team also intends to send out an email to everyone probably after the weekend with a copy of the presentation, as well as what we hope will be useful background information and some technical supports, because we very much look forward to tonight's session and the weekend tour, not as sort of one-shot deals, but rather the beginning of a process here where we hope that we see more and more replication of the kinds of ideas that we'll be discussing today. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Art.
All right, thank you very much. I'll just stop your screen share, and I'm then going to put mine up. I just want, while I'm doing this, I just want to tell everyone that what I'm planning on doing is telling you what the destination is. We're talking about an energy transition. That means we're in transit to somewhere. So I'm going to tell you what that somewhere is. And I'm going to use pictures as the means of showing you what is possible. Some of you probably will, for example, up in the top left, know what a solar and a wind farm looks like. Some of you may know what a Tesla supercharging station is, and perhaps even fewer know what a command and control center is for a utility on the grid. And I will be moving fairly sharply through all this and using pictures primarily because they say so much more than words. Like I've put up a transmission towers, and here's a California aqueduct, and I really like this picture below when one says transportation chaos. Now you know what that means to me. And that's really quite incredible. Now, the source of all this, of course, is saying home and community really do matter. And we have to focus in on the community. And there's many dimensions to it, but cost saving, sustainability, and safety really are the important things to consider. The mission statement for this presentation, and I'll read this: since climate change is irreversible, the mission is to encourage decentralized, reliable microgrid use to avoid the worst of the climate catastrophe by delivering affordable energy grounded in science and nature's flows. The mission, or pardon me, the presentation is going to be in 5 parts. I will be looking at grids and microgrids, geothermal, solar, wind, and storage, EVs, and conclusions. And these, of course, are addressing the Manotick microgrid. There are other dimensions that are possible within microgrids, and you'll see some of them as we go through this. Section 1, we're talking grids and microgrids, and 22 US states have community microgrids, not individual homes, but entire communities already in place. And with the present Conservative government in Ontario, we have none. The North American grid, for many of you, you may not know that the grid is broken into 3 parts: East, West, and Texas. And that, by the way, spreads up into Canada as well as down into Mexico. We're all connected into a North American grid. Each state or province has its own called independent system operator. And in Ontario, we call it the independent electricity system operator. Why? I have no idea, but the IESO, here's a command and control center, and which is taken, when this operator was in full flight. And this is one of several control stations at the ISO. I visited there some years ago. Now, this is my microgrid control center, which is a slightly smaller budget, but you get the idea. These are 3 Tesla Powerwall batteries that are sitting in my basement, and you'll get an opportunity to see those during the tour. And for those who are technically inclined, there's one engineer there, I'm told. You can take a look at an electrical one-line diagram, whereas for the rest of us, we have what's important is the generation. At a generating station, we have transmission tower lines and we have distribution power lines. Now, it's quite important to know the difference between transmission and distribution, and I'm very careful in using them correctly. Typically, transmission are the big metal towers, whereas distribution are the wooden poles. Now, this is a diagram of the transmission grid in southern Ontario, which is feeding 47 local distribution companies. Now, a local distribution company is Hydro One, it is Hydro Ottawa, Pembroke Hydro, Thunder Bay Hydro, et cetera, et cetera. There's 47 of them. And anything that is not in its own LDC is covered off by Hydro One. Here's an interesting picture which just shows transmission towers, but I liked it because if you look down at the bottom here is some fossil fuels being delivered by train off to somewhere, the clean energy versus dirty energy. Now, the Ontario grid is really kind of interesting. Just look at some of these numbers. Distribution transformer, there's over 1 million of those, whereas there's almost 11 million power poles, and which is a huge area. And much of this is 100 years old, and what could possibly go wrong? And here's what happened in May, downtown, or on Ottawa Street, Maryville Road. And here's what happened during our tornado of September 2018. And this is the ice storm of 1998. The grid is very fragile. In March of this year, of course, there was a tornado that went through Mississippi. And this picture is very graphic, of course. There's no buildings, no telephone poles, there's just debris. But I draw your attention to the fact that there is a vehicle that's on top of the debris. That means that was the last thing that the tornado put down. It had lifted that vehicle and dropped it down later. You're not safe in your vehicle. Now, here's a very good picture. I don't know how I could possibly describe this in words, but you can see how freezing rain has gotten onto the cables carrying power, and they're drooping. And look at these over here. They've drooped so far, they're actually touching the ground. And how they have not failed is a miracle. I don't understand that, but that is part of the problem. If we are decentralized, then there's no need for any of these poles, and these failure modes will not be an issue. Now, a microgrid itself is composed of many things, and it need not include all of these at all. And if you notice the color of the little discs, of course, are talking about generators, energy storage, solar and wind and combined heat and power. But these are the generators, and a microgrid can include not only the electrical part, but also thermal energy. And I'm going to be talking quite a bit about thermal. Whereas the utility itself out here is can have a switch on it that we can turn it on and off. And so that these loads, being EVs and homes, commercial industrial buildings, and in fact, entire communities and institutions. Now, they're not all necessary for a microgrid, and it's all controlled by one central command and control center. And you will see mine. Here's a simple diagram of a direct current off-grid community, and you can see that 5 of these buildings have solar, and this one does not, but it probably has a battery in it itself. But these are all connected together into a community battery, and then that battery then can be connected onto the grid. And then once it's on the grid, then it's converted to alternating current, and it's sent back to this community. Here's another quick picture that says, here's wind energy, PV panels feeding into the control center, a bunch of EVs with storage, and here's multiple homes as loads on that microgrid. Now, the advantages of the Manotick microgrid, of course, it means all my heat and electricity is free. It's sourced locally. It's right here, and it's at your place as well. And myself as an owner, I oversee production and future expansions, and I have the ability to island, which means I can cut off the grid at any time. And you might hear the term distributed energy resources. It's really a term that is used by the utility, and they're only interested in electrical energy. Now, the rewards to the owners are, of course, reliability, efficiency, resilience, sustainability, health, safety, survivability, profits, and return on investments. And during the tour, we can talk about what all those really mean, and I will be happy to show you some hard data as to what's happening. And of course, the nice thing about it is that I'm in control. So there's very few rules and complications that are being imposed on me, and I can do a lot of things without going and begging to the utility. This is what my system looks like as a block diagram, and we'll start here on the left. That says the demands. Of course, there's lighting, cooking, computing, etc. There's the EVs, they need to be charged. I got space heating and water heating, and if you notice, the color of the blocks change because this is all to do with heat at the bottom, whereas the rest is electrical. And we do have, or I do have, the ability to island with a switch, which can turn the grid on and off, either manually, automatic, or on a telephone app. What is interesting to note is up here is the demand energy in my home is 82% of it is thermal and 18% is electricity. So one would think that I should be focusing 82% of my attention on heat and cool and not so much on electricity. And most people find that a little bit hard to understand, but that's the way the world really is. Now, I have given here some accumulated data over a 5-year period, 60 months, which shows that my supply is the blue line, and you notice it wiggles on its way up. The flat portions are the winter, which means snow is on my arrays and I'm not generating a lot of electricity. But here we are coming into spring, and I'm just rounding the corner, actually up over here, and then I make out like crazy, and producing far more energy than I'm consuming. But bleak days are coming again next winter, and so it goes. And if you notice the difference between the blue line and the red line, I call that a return on investment gap. It means I'm generating far more energy than I'm using. Now, U.S. utilities and Canadians are about the same. They're saying, well, look, we're spending less on power production and more on delivery as time goes on. And you can see the graphs here. But I just make the point that with a microgrid, you know, power production is zero, power delivery is zero, and that really means these other costs are zero. It's very, very cost efficient. Now, you're going to hear me talk about virtual power plants, which are really many microgrids like mine aggregated together to become an energy wholesaler. And so this quick diagram shows some EVs and you know, windmills and loads of all types, and here's some solar feeding in. And the blue lines are just showing that there is a computer connection and going into the control center, which are really the brains of it all, and ultimately deciding whether to feed into the grid or to draw from it. And looking at Ontario's case, as you can see, here we are coming up to an interesting time when some nuclear reactors are being shut down to be refurbished, and looking out well into the 2040s, that says there's a gap, and one has to fill it. And right now, I'm of course saying, because things are changing so rapidly, it's ideal that microgrids can fill this gap without any difficulty at all. And so we're looking well into the future that says, and what of course is happening in Ontario, certainly happening across all provinces. Geothermal. You're standing on a vast amount of energy, and they use heat pumps to access them. I won't spend any time on this, but it uses the Carnot cycle, the same cycle that is used in your refrigerator, but it permits drawing energy from the outside air and delivering it inside. Even though the outside air might be at -20, you can still be pumping it up and getting plus 40 degrees C in the ducts going into your house. Now, where does that energy come from? Well, it comes from, of course, what's happening in the Earth's core. And there's some hot nuclear decay that's occurring beneath the Earth's crust. And it's somewhere between 2 or 3 and 20 kilometers down. And of course, none of this is to scale, but you get the idea. It's very hot, and that is what makes the Earth a livable planet, and not something like the moon, which does not have a hot core and it's just a rock. Now, this is what's happening in the Earth. This is a little closer to scale, but we have a very thin crust, and as you go down deeper and deeper, you get to the very inner core, which is sitting there at 6,000 degrees C, just like the temperature of the surface of the sun. And so there's a lot of energy that you're standing on, thermal energy. And for example, here is in Iceland, where in the background, you can see a thermal plant, which is making steam and running a turbine to provide electricity. And here it is, even in the winter where everybody's swimming in the hot springs. and and it's all that energy from the center of the earth that's keeping that water warm. Now, heat pumps that come in two types. There's closed systems and open systems. And these are, here's one which is horizontal loops that are in the ground, buried very shallowly, and down about 2 meters, 2 to 3 meters. Here's another closed loop where you throw loops into a pond or into a river, and you're drawing energy from it. Here is another closed loop where series of wells are drilled and energy is extracted that way. At the bottom left here, we've got an open loop system whereupon fluids are pumped down one well and water is drawn out of the other well, and so as it were, cold water is pumped down and warmer water is brought back up. And I'll show you another one here. This is a little bit deeper, and you may have heard of these, whereby they're using the permeability of rock and actually fractured rock, and it's like fracking that you've heard to extract fossil fuels. Well, using the same techniques that cold fluids are pushed down and they migrate through the cracks in the rock and are brought up as very hot, because these rocks are hot, of course, and fed into a generating turbine and ultimately as electricity. Here is a single home with wells that are drilled. There's 4 of them in a closed loop, and down no more than 200 meters. There's a Alberta company that has been drilling for some time, and they're over now in Germany, going down 4.5 kilometers to produce power for homes in Germany, and they finish up in one area and they move on to the next. So they've got a very big and long-term contract. Now here's a drawing that says, here's a community microgrid using geothermal. And here's the street, and it's got the normal buried facilities or utilities, cable, electric, gas, storm sewer, water. But it's got these 2 others which are in there, and they are geothermal heating. So there's wells drilled, say every 20 feet, going down underneath the road. You're not taking up any space, and all this at build time is open anyway, and it's then feeding energy into each one of the buildings as the length of the road extends off into the infinity there. Now here's geothermal district heating concept, and this is used, quite frankly, it is used in Alberta, in Edmonton. Exactly this concept, where there is an energy station where wells are drilled and they're getting geothermal heat and then shooting it off into buildings that are within the community, and of course it'll work both ways. It can be used to both heat and cool buildings. And this is rather nice in that as a community is being built, you can add a new building on and make another connection as time goes on. So it might take years to build out a community, and you can add to it as you're going, right from a single energy station. Here's a rather nice one. I like it because it's a very high surface area, and look at all the heat transfer surfaces going on there. and feeding into a well, or pardon me, a tank of water. And so that's warm water that's sitting in the ground and pumped out as required to heat the home. This also's got a little bit of PV on it as well. Here's what a shallow 6 to 8 feet deep flat overlapping geothermal heat exchanger looks like. And if you notice, the walls are vertical. They haven't collapsed in. They're not. This is not sandy soil. This looks more like lay to clay. And here's just a picture of well drilling. And you know, it's muddy and dirty, but it's happening prior to a building going up or a street going in. And here's a typical slinky coil in a shallow geothermal trench. And here's what my system looked like. I'm using helical coils as well. And this was what's happening in my house. They again look at the vertical walls, and this coil is just being prepared to be picked up by the excavator and dropped into place. And here's an artistic plan view giving some dimensions of what that heating coil actually looks like. And in fact, I have 4 of them, and this picture only has a picture of 3 of them. This is my geothermal wall, and it looks kind of busy, but you'll get to see it during the tour. It's it's got a lot more things in it than normal people do. I had asked the installer to add some extra things, and the normal installation does not have all this, but I put in actuators. That's these little boxes. They're ball valves, and if you look, you can see little yellow lines. Those are extra thermocouples going in. I like to know what's going on using the like all scientists do, saying you can't manage what you can't measure. So I have to measure things to know what's really going on. Solar, wind, and storage. There's many natural and creative ways to generate and store energy. Here's a microgrid boat. As you can see, it's got PV solar panels, photovoltaic cells, and it's got 2 vertical axis windmills there. And so that is self-contained, and there's a number of designs like that. Here's a concept one of a much larger ocean vessel, and a floating microgrid, because it is all self-contained. All the energy it's getting is from these sails and that are using wind power. Here's a vertical axis wind turbine. It's like one I would like to get eventually for my home, and eventually I will. I want to show here some data, which of course happened here in this month, and you can see this is a picture of solar energy, or a graphic, and from midnight until midnight, and you can see the sun rose at 6 in the morning and set around 6 in the evening, and as the sun rose, it got hotter and hotter, and midday, and then from there on it started to drop a little. The little bumps are just showing passing clouds, but that's my generation, and here is my demand side. That's saying my house is demanding power at this rate, and these 2 profiles are completely different. How do you match them to such that supply equals demand? Well, what you do is, in this case, the profile of energy above the line is when I'm drawing from the grid, And below the line is when I am delivering energy to the grid. I'm producing more than I need. And you can see how it is very irregular, and it peaks along. And so the bottom line is, through that one day I generated 36 kilowatt hours. The home only used 24, therefore I left 12 kilowatt hours on the grid. Now in California, going back and comparing demand on the 31st of March for various years from 2012 through to time now, that you look at this top line, it says this is what their grid had to supply throughout the day. It was not flat, it changes throughout the day. And as people started adding solar arrays, the demand after sunrise, of course, started to drop. And as each year goes by, you can see more PV was being added, and in fact, down to 2020 and even lower today. And they call it the duck curve because it kind of looks like a duck. And if you look here, this period is very stressful, and this is when peak usage is going on. People are coming home from work and going out to restaurants and cooking meals and what have you. So there's a very high growth in demand, and so you will hear me and others talk about peaker plants and just how do you manage those. I want to show you some desalination and water purification that is used around the world, and in fact we can make use of it as well, whereby you're getting solar electricity in equipment room and water tanks. Here's a micro turbine, kind of unique in that it this little guy is a turbine that can burn almost any liquid or gaseous fuel, and including up to 100% hydrogen, which means it can be very clean. Here's what you'll see a lot in these battery storage projects, and they're used to meet the peak demand as well as solve local congestion, and used extensively for grid balancing. And this plant is going to be in Ontario, southern Ontario. This is what Tesla makes, Tesla Megapacks for utility scale battery storage. You can see it's 480 volts alternating current, 3-phase. Each one of these fits into a shipping container, and there's some statistics on the height, and so you get a sense of how big those are. Here is a typical small battery installation, and which is using what is known as grid forming inverters, and that can add to grid stability. And the problem is that if you have a bunch of renewables and they grow to up to 60% or get bigger than 60% of what is being provided by the central generator, you can get some instabilities. And so by putting these batteries in, you can bring stability back. Here's a unique thing that's happening in Australia, that people can afford to put some solar on the roofs, but the batteries are very expensive. So in fact, the utility has gone and added community batteries on telephone poles. And so they have a network of some 40 of these telephone pole batteries, which the community uses, and this becomes a virtual power plant. You've never seen, you might have heard of flow batteries. And if you've never seen a picture, this is what they look like. And if you're really interested, Google can tell you all about what they are. Now, the real question that has been around is whether wind and solar farms are more profitable than agriculture. And you know, you take a look at that and you say, is that really worth it? And this has generated the world of agrivoltaics, and which says that you can put PV panels between rows of plants, or you can make a greenhouse and just put PV panels on top, or just put PV panels above the crop. And here's some real pictures, and you can see how the PV panels are mounted on a frame which is elevated from the ground, so that the sheep can graze around underneath, or even cattle can use that as grazing, and also provide shade to get the animals out of the sun when there's an awful lot of heat. Here's a very good one. As you can see, the solar arrays are spaced at the top here. I'll say 60% is actually solar, and 40% is open, and that provides enough energy and sunlight for the plants to keep them both cool and producing high yield. Here's another one that you can see with the plants growing underneath the solar arrays, and the solar panels are kept cooler because the plants underneath are helping keeping them cool, and at the same time the solar arrays are keeping the plants cool and reducing the amount of evaporation of water. Here's another interesting design that sort of shows a double sloping canopy, and even when they put this on top of roofs, it attracts birds, bugs, bees, you know, even in the inner city. Here's another one that is a little more sophisticated, in that the solar arrays are controlled by AI to control the amount of sunlight that is coming down on the plants, depending on what the state of their maturity is through their growth cycle and their need for water, etc. Here's one which a very high structure, which is in fact got fruit trees underneath. So we're making dual use of land. Here's one which I thought was rather clever, in that the PV panels, the solar panels, are double-sided and put vertical, such that the big machines can till the land and use it like a normal farm. And to make sure that you understand that not everything is flat, in northern China, they've put quite a massive solar array on top of a hilltop. Now here's another one that's a miniature greenhouse prototype with semi-transparent solar cells, and of course you can then scale this one up, and so you can have greenhouses that are generating power as well. Here's in the Netherlands, that you can see in the background here, there's a number of wind turbines, and these PV or solar panels are being put down over top of existing crops, and you can see it's half built here, and the plants are already in and growing, and they're putting the PV panels on top and making dual use out of the land. Here's a retrofit community, and you can think of my place as just being one of these houses, but here's an entire community, and everybody's got some solar on top, and they all connect together. Here's a new build which quite frankly, it looks quite ugly, but there's not a, any spare rooftop that is not covered with a solar panel. Vertical solar panels are definitely around, and when you come and view my place, I'll show you some development work I'm doing with a startup here in Ottawa to develop some unique and very, very different way to capture the energy from the sun. I put this up because it's kind of interesting. You say, here's just a normal community. What's it got going for it? Why is that a microgrid? Well, they've all got batteries, and that's all there is. And that itself qualifies as a microgrid. And now here's one in obviously in California somewhere, calling itself energy smart connected community, and you're saying, well, I don't see anything. Yes, well, if you look at the back of the building, you'll see the PV panels on the back. Here's what's happening in Europe, of course. They have both solar PV and solar hot water, and here next door neighbor, hot water and solar PV. Here you've heard of Tesla solar roof. Well, here's one in Hawaii where the entire roof, all the shingles are in fact gathering energy from the sun, and they're all photovoltaic, and so the whole roof is generating power. In China, here's a floating solar farm, and it helps keep the water cool, and the fish kind of like that. And of course, it is not really occupying any land and interfering with agriculture. However, not everything works perfectly, and one has to be concerned about that. So how do you solve that? Well, you lift the solar panels off the ground and put them on rooftops. And here's an industrial area, and just look at all the rooftops that are going unused. All the energy is still falling on those roofs, and it's not being collected. And in fact, you could even, in the loading bays, you could even see canopies put over there to even gather more. So this is, in my mind, just wasted collection space. Here's what a rooftop generating power plant looks like. And I was talking with Paul that Albert is in fact quite busy with Isolera, putting up rooftop solar arrays on a lot of schools in the Ottawa area. Now, if you're ever flying in to a city, look out the window, and now you're going to see things like I see things, just a total waste of power that should be collected, full of collectors on all these flat rooftops, but they're not. And have we got room to grow? We certainly do, lots of it. Here's another one. It's a business community with a bunch of flat roofs again, and I look at the parking lots and say, couldn't you put canopies over there? Well, you certainly could, and make better use of all these flat rooftops to collect energy. Here's some R&D that's going on urban rooftops, and looking at cooler roofs and cooler photovoltaic panels, and the crops are cool, less wind on them and less water. And some of the early R&D is saying, hey, we can get greater yield from these plants than you can just on the ground. When I saw this picture, I gasped, because it's a picture in high density shelters in China, and just look at that. I'd hate to live there, but look at that. And it's great flat areas that could be used to collect energy. Here in Morocco, there is a central station with a bunch of mirrors, which are all directing energy directly at a central power station where they melt salts and that way they can store energy in very high temperatures. Here's another unique design out of Morocco in terms of solar panels that are tracking the sun. Here's in Los Angeles, or just east of Los Angeles, here's a solar and wind farm. I drove through there some years ago, and those windmills are as far as the eye can see. It's really quite incredible. Here's JFK Airport, which is under construction, and it's going to have 13,000 solar panels on it, and you can see some of it on the access arms that go out to the loading bays for the aircraft, and you can see some over here. Yet to go is this flat roof area and these flat areas, but JFK 1 will produce enough power to run the entire airport as a microgrid. In Switzerland, they're off and doing trials on laying PV panels between the rails, and to take advantage of that land and to generate power. Whereas here in Germany, they're saying, well, we have roadways, why can't we put PV panels along the sides and crossing over? And they even got little turbines, as you see, on each one of these towers. So they're using both wind and PV to generate power and not use up any more land. I give here as well, it's a good picture of a small hydro generating station in northern Sweden, suitable for, quite a large microgrid. This one is kind of unique in France because you can't see anything, because there's 3 generators in this river, and they're underwater, but they're generating power for the community. Here's a service station or an energy station, a microgrid in Massachusetts, and you can see the canopy here is generating power, and it's being stored off in batteries, and these are charging stations for electric vehicles. And there's a restaurant and convenience store and what have you that people can use. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that sort of charging network. There's a USA carport solar canopy. These sort of things are coming to us. Here's an entire bus fleet at a depot, and it's being charged, and the power that is going to charge these vehicles is coming from this canopy. And here's a similar one in Morocco, which is a carport, and they just put a big canopy over it and collecting the power which would otherwise go to waste. Now, electric vehicles, they're quite an addition to microgrids, and I'm going to include this because it's for any car buffs out there. This is the new Tesla Super Roadster. It's got 1,000-kilometer range, and it can get up 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 1.9 seconds. Top speed of 400 kilometers per hour. Here's a microgrid EV charging station, and clearly I can't afford one of those, but obviously somebody can. But here's solar arrays that are feeding in to charge the electric vehicle. This is more my style, where there's Tesla Powerwall batteries, and here's the electric vehicle that's being charged. It's a level 2 charger, which can produce up to 19 kilowatt hours of AC. Here's a Tesla supercharging station with a level 2 chargers, which can produce up to 250 kilowatts of direct current to feed into, which means charge time is very much faster. And of course, there's 40,000 Tesla power stations around the world. And typically what they do as well is they use these used lithium-ion batteries that eventually don't produce enough current to drive a vehicle, but you don't need as much current when you're just charging up a battery, and so you can get second life out of them. And so a battery can last typically 100 years. Here's a level 4 supercharging station, a Tesla one, which can get up to 600 kilowatts of direct current. And of course, underground parking for managed charging stations. All these concepts are coming here. They're not here now, but they certainly exist in the US. And here's just a concept of a transition from a internal combustion engine gasoline station to include EV charging. And you can see some of this along the rest areas along the 401. Now, vehicle to grid, and the concept here is that it's energy on wheels, where the vehicle is actually connected directly into the grid. And what it means is that this is just like a gasoline truck going from where it fills up to deliver gasoline wherever it's going. Only in this case, it's electricity. You fill up your battery on wheels and you drive it to where the energy is needed, and you plug in there. And that's called, of course, vehicle to grid. And in fact, some activities or R&D has taken place to, in fact, provide power with nothing but Powerwall batteries in California to supply peak energy between 5 and 9 p.m. and pay the people who own the Powerwalls up to $2 per kilowatt hour. Considering what you pay, that's good business. Here's a concept of a Tesla vehicle and what it looks like, and it's called a skateboard. And because it looks like a skateboard, you can see here's the front motor and here's the rear motor. And the costs that are driving everything here, of course, is the battery. It can be from 25 to 40% of the vehicle cost. The motors are there to provide all-wheel drive, and the frame, of course, is really quite important. I'm going to talk a bit more about the frame, but this is the battery, and the battery becomes an integral part of the frame. What Tesla is doing is they're using aluminum die-cast frames for both the front and the rear, and each one of those die-cast single piece replaces 60 parts, both 60 in the front, 60 in the back. Then when they integrate this together, it becomes very stiff and extremely safe, and it's the safest vehicle on the road today. Here's what it looks like as an actual photograph, and you can see the battery and the motor and the electronics that are running everything. All you have to do is add a canopy on top of passenger compartment, which seems like it's a second thought, because this is everything that the vehicle is. Now here's a Tesla Model 3 skateboard, and the front end is designed for accidents, and it's totally crushable, and to try and protect the occupants and of course the battery. I'm more concerned about the battery than the occupant. Anyway, here's a head-on collision where Tesla Model 3 got hit by a pickup truck that was running a light. And I just draw your attention to the fact that the total front end is crushed and collapsed, but the door is still opened normally. The tires were not damaged. And of course, as I say, the driver, battery, and tires survived without damage. I don't know what happened to the pickup truck and whether that occupant survived or not, but the Tesla owner walked away. This is what an electric motor looks like on a Tesla, and you probably won't